think the Palestinian resistance is unshakable, it's immovable, it will never stop. The Palestinian desire for peace will not be crushed, will not be silenced, and it won't end until, like I said, a democratic secular state is established in our shared homeland. A state where Muslims, Christians, and Jews can live as equals. A shared state, a secular democracy where every vote counts, and people can raise their children to love their diverse homeland with its multitude of cultures, its rich history, and its promising future. There's a misguided assumption that because, or when people share a land, it makes them enemies, or inevitably they have to be enemies. It's not true. Israelis and Palestinians will join together in their shared homeland, and they will form something that is greater than the sum of its parts. It will be a secular democracy with equality, with democracy for Israelis and Palestinians as equals. Thank you very much.
So the way we're gonna do this is for the question and answer portion. If you could please come to my right or your left and deliver your question, and please take a seat. So please keep your questions concise, relevant to the speaker's topic, and respectful to the speaker. And as per the speaker's request, we will take 3 questions, and then the speaker will answer them in succession. Okay? So if anyone has a question, please go ahead and line up to the right.
Line up over there. That's a question. Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Nico, could you talk about the way you were raised in Israel, how you were raised to feel about the Palestinians? The reason I'm asking also is there's a wonderful YouTube high school students being shown projects done as Israeli students, and their response is really quite heartbreaking, actually, and wonderful at the same time.
I have a number of issues with what you said. I was in Israel in 2008 when the Operation Testnet, and I just returned from there 3 days ago. So I'm not familiar with the situation. First of all, regarding your comments about the Muslim 11, or the UCI 11, whatever you call them, there is a problem in that you misunderstand what free speech is. Free speech is you can say whatever you want.
I misunderstand?
Yeah. And,
You're here to tell me that I misunderstand?
And let me explain what our culture is.
Are you going to
Our
give me a lecture?
culture
Are you gonna ask a
is that
question?
you speak and then I speak. You give me a chance to talk.
Are you giving a lecture?
And I listen, and then you have a chance to talk, and then I listen.
No, that's not how it
That's
works.
our culture.
That's not how it works.
It's not shouting down somebody and have the
It's not how it
role of
works.
Bob.
I came to give a lecture. You may ask a question, not give a counter lecture. Oh, you want to give it? You have an answer? You have a question?
To mention
So you're going to give a lecture. All right, so we'll sit
the
down.
half of the rockets that went into Israel from Gaza.
If you could
that
please
preceded
get to
that.
the question. Thank you.
You also neglected to mention the Arabs, Israeli Arabs that served as members of the Knesset. You also neglected to mention the treatment of Jews in the Arab countries.
thinks this is funny. This guy thinks this is funny.
If you have a question for the speaker,
Yeah.
please
You think it's funny?
give it.
My answer to my question is
The
this.
thing is,
Why is this maniacal obsession with Israel? There are 70,000 Syrians that were just murdered a few feet away in the last 21 months. Why do we have an Israel Awareness Week every week, year after year, when there are many more times Muslims killed in Syria and Mali and all over the world? Only this obsession with Israel. That's the question.
Do you want to do another question?
Yeah, sure, we have, that really wasn't a question, so there's actually room for two more before I can reply. Go ahead, please.
Okay, I just wanted to mention something that you started off your address by saying that you were excited by the invitation from the ECI and MSU to come speak here. I want to know if you're aware that from the same podium, the same platform that you're talking, the MSU has repeatedly brought down a speaker by the name of Malik Ali, who has called Jews, not Zionists. Okay, I'm a Jew. I'm an observant Hasidic Jew. And he said that the Jews are the new Nazis. This is a quote that he said. You can ask the fellows over here, and afterwards they continue to bring him down to speak. So when you say, you know, if you're reluctant maybe to come speak, but you feel like you have a message, I want to know how you're excited by an invitation from a group that repeatedly brought down a speaker that's just one of his quotes, but has preached blatant anti-Semitism, and nothing to do with Israel. And he didn't say Zionists are the new Nazis. He said Jews are the new Nazis. So if you want to share with me how you're excited and you're proud of speaking from the same podium as a speaker like that.
I don't know what that question's all about. Are there any questions other than this?
Yeah, one
Please,
more.
yeah.
The Arab League offered Israel recognition and peace a few years ago. Israel refused. Why?
Okay, thank you. Okay,
I have a question.
you know, there's,
I have one more question.
so hold on, I'll answer these three and then we'll do another round. And you go over there.
No, I'll sit here.
There's this particular topic, of course, is highly charged. There's no question about that. I don't think I'm breaking any news here. And typically in events like this, a speaker is invited to speak, and people can choose to come and listen. If they choose to come and listen, that's fine. But the rules of engagement are not that after the speech is over, everybody else gets to give a counter speech. If you don't like what you heard, you just take it in and you go home. If you have a question to ask, you ask a question and you go home. I've been to speeches, I've been to events where the speaker spoke, said things that I did not agree with. It didn't occur to me to stand and demand equal time to give an extra speech. That's not how it works. So it's interesting that when pro-Israeli groups send their delegates to events like this, they always feel they have the right to give a counter speech. That's not how it works. I have the podium, and I was invited to speak, and nobody else was.
How about Michael Oren? Did he have a right to
You may
speak?
listen quietly, or you may be rude and not follow the rules as you choose to do, but that's your problem.
I don't have a
But
problem.
you don't get to do what you like. The first question was how I was raised in regards to Palestinians. I'm going to get more into that in tonight's lecture when I actually talk about the book, because my book talks about how I was raised and the Zionist upbringing and so on. But it was interesting. I'll tell you one little story that I will probably talk about tonight as well. It's a big part of my book as well. It's a story that has to do with my mother. And she told me the story about 1948. She was a young mother then. She's 86 years old now. She was born and raised in Jerusalem. And she talked about how when the Palestinian neighborhoods in West Jerusalem were taken, their homes were made available for Israeli families, to Israeli families. We're not talking about the old city of Jerusalem, we're talking about neighborhoods outside the city. These are beautiful homes, these are beautiful neighborhoods, well-to-do people, and so forth. Now the community was forced to leave, and these homes were made available to Israeli families. Now the narrative that you learn as an Israeli, the Zionist narrative in general, which is also prevalent here, is that the Arabs attacked in 1948, intending to destroy the Jewish community. Miraculously, the Jews prevailed, and the Jewish state was established. And then the Jewish state, the state of Israel, asked the Palestinians to stay, and they left anyway. Well, this is true, then there's no problem taking it home, because the people left on their own accord. They left an empty house, and if somebody needs a house, why not take it? There's no moral dilemma here. The story my mother told, the way she told that story of how she was offered that home, she was shocked that anybody would expect she would take somebody else's home. And the way she tells the story, even today, when she's 86, she's been telling me the story her whole life, my whole life, is how could I possibly take the home of another family? How could I possibly move into the home of another mother that now has to live in exile? Now that was a problem for me, because you grow up, on the other hand, in a country that teaches a certain narrative. And the narrative of 1948, the heroism and so forth that the Israelis claim was theirs, is part of our identity as Israelis. And the story that my mother told kind of put a kink in this narrative. It was a problem for me. And it wasn't until many, many years later, actually, that I began to understand and reconcile what the problem was and what she was telling me. And in fact, what she was saying is she was saying exactly what Palestinians have been saying since 1948, that they were forced out of their homes, and their country was taken, and their homes were taken. So I guess I was raised with this dual message. On the one hand, this message from home. On the other hand, this message from school and community and so forth. The way my life ended up, I was fortunately exposed to Palestinians more than most Israelis are. I was exposed to Palestine more than most Israelis are. My father's activism after he retired from the military had a lot to do with it. And I was able to really engage this issue in a way that led me to where I am today, realizing that while Jews as a religion really have no claim to Palestine or to that country, Israelis who were born and raised there, even though they are the children of colonizers and settlers, this is their home. So they have a right to be there. Palestinians, of course, have a right to be there. And the two nations need to create a democracy with equal rights for everyone, because they both have are both justified in living there and claiming the land to be theirs, to be their home. So that was my upbringing. That was how I ended up with this point of view. I think there's an obsession with Israel, and I don't know if it is an obsession, but I think there's an interest. When you look at the map, and I do this often when I speak in schools, I'll show a map, or I'll ask the students if there's anybody who cannot find it on the map. And often there are people who cannot find it on a map. And when you look at a map, it's not surprising. I mean, you can't blame somebody for not finding it on the map. Because what do you see when you look at a map of the region? You see Africa, it's huge. You see the Arabian Peninsula, it's huge. You see other parts of Turkey and Syria, and you see all these big countries. And then there's a sliver of land right on the coast. The name of this country doesn't fit, so it's usually on the Mediterranean. Sometimes they'll just say Jerusalem, or they'll abbreviate it. And that's the country we're all talking about. So perhaps there is an obsession. So perhaps there is an obsession, but I don't think the obsession is necessarily on one side or the other. I think the obsession, if there is one, is perhaps on both sides.
Is he even answering the question?
How and why is it that everybody chooses to talk about that sliver of land where so much takes place in Africa, so much takes place in other countries? And I think the reality is that people do talk about other things too. People do talk about Syria, and people do talk about Darfur, and people do talk about other places, and people do talk about this. There's room and there's time to talk about all these atrocities and all these regimes that have to be changed. I think the other reason that there's so much interest in Israel is because people feel cheated. I think many people, like I did, were brought up on this notion that Israel is this very positive, good thing. That it's a democracy, that it was an opportunity for Jewish people to once again find a homeland, and so on. And what they find is that it's not true. They found that the state of Israel was established as a result of a horrendous act of terrorism that was inflicted by Zionist militias against the Palestinians, a terrible campaign of ethnic cleansing. Today you have millions of refugees who live in refugee camps who are not permitted to go back to their homes.
By who?
Yet people talk of the right of all Jews to go to that place and live there and claim it as theirs. There's this horrific double standard that people just don't understand. So I think perhaps the sense of disappointment from what Israel could have been, maybe should have been, or maybe never could have been and should have been, but there was this expectation, and now we realize it was a big lie, and there's a lot of potential. I mean, Israeli and Palestinian societies have a lot of potential. They're both very highly educated societies, they're highly industrious, they're hardworking. They could create something wonderful together, as long as it's not one at the expense of the other. So again, I don't know if it is an obsession, but there's certainly a lot of interest, and I think those are the reasons why. It's interesting you asked about the Arab peace plan. There was an old Arab peace plan, I think in 2002, and now there's this new discussion with the Secretary of State, with Kerry, who spoke at the Foreign Relations Committee and said that there's still a small window of opportunity for a two-state solution, for peace, within a year or two. Israel did not accept any peace plan, will never accept any peace plan. Israel and Zionism are in their essence, contradict any notion of compromise on the land. Zionism says this land belongs to the Jewish people, we are here to give it to the Jewish people. Anybody else who lives there is there by mistake and needs to go. And if anything, we've seen anything over the last 65 years, is how Israel does it. Through ethnic cleansing, through killing, through racist laws, and so on. So I don't think there's any surprise that Israel refuses to make peace, particularly on the issue of Palestine, because it means they would have to compromise on the land. Israel is the obstacle to peace in Palestine. Because for Israel, this is a zero-sum game, everything. And if this conflict goes on for another 120 years, there's no problem, as long as they've got a bigger army. And if we look at the history of this, what they call this ridiculous peace process, you know, in the early 70s, there were Israelis like my father, and who were married, and other Zionist Israelis who wanted to develop this notion of the two-state solution. Maybe there was some kind of a compromise where you could have two states. Well, they went on and discussed it, and that's when that plan was put together. In the 80s, the Israeli Knesset passed a law that made it illegal for these people to meet and talk to Palestinians, the PLO. And then suddenly in the 90s, they signed the Oslo Peace Accord. You have to wonder, wow, people thought we're being changed, Israel changed, Israel wants peace. But the people who actually did read the Oslo Peace Accord realized and said very clearly, there is nothing peaceful about the Oslo Peace Accord. It's an attempt to bring the Palestinians to surrender. By 1993, it was absolutely clear the West Bank could never become a Palestinian state. It was completely integrated into Israel. The conquest of the West Bank became completely irreversible, and that's why Rabin and Paris and those others decided it was a good time to bring in Arafat to pretend to make peace, but try to bring them to surrender, which they couldn't, which is why it failed. But again, this is why Israel is against it. Israel will never accept any kind of a peaceful resolution with the Palestinians. It will never recognize that Palestinians have any right. That's why peace lies beyond Zionism. Peace is, that's where the equivalence with South Africa is. You have to get rid of apartheid in order to have a democracy and move on. You're going to have to get rid of this Zionist entity in a peaceful way, through political transformation that will bring about a real democracy with equal rights for everybody, for all the citizens. Yeah, that's
Okay, thank you for coming out. We hope today's event was informative. Our series continues the rest of the week. We'll be out on Ring Road during the day, so please join us for tonight for The General's Son Part 2 with Mr. Rico Pillette, sharing his experiences growing up as the son of an adios soldier. And this will be at 7:30 p.m. in the Crystal Cove Auditorium, and he'll be selling his books. And also, we have shirts in the back for $5 for this week. And just for the people in MSU, we're just gonna have to just like hold on in the back, just stay here like after the event, because we're gonna have a quick little meeting for the rest of the week. And I would like to thank everyone else for coming out. And We hope to see you tonight.
Oh, huh?
Thank you.